All right, so this video is on different styles of government. I'm Mr. Reed. If you are one of my students, one of your requirements is that you are recording notes during this. And if you are just watching this to learn, you might find it helpful to jot down a few things too. All right, so first of all, what is the goal of this whole video? Well, our goal is hopefully to help us start to learn how different governments are the same and how they're different. We're going to look at each of those governments individually in this presentation and try to make some connections. So it's also important to know, what am I not going to talk about in this video? Well, I'm not going to talk about capitalism, communism, and socialism. Why, might you ask? Well, those three things are economic systems. They deal with how the economies of countries are run. Now, you will read, and you'll probably hear in a lot of places, governments referred to as capitalist, communist, and socialist, especially communist and socialist when you're learning about the Cold War. However, by and large, that's talking about how they run their economy, and there are other words we can use to describe their government. We'll get to those in a moment. All right, so it's important to know that there are really three basic descriptions of government. I like to look at this government as a giant family tree, and it's a tree with a lot of branches that intertwine. So the big three ways you can describe government is government can either be democratic, and that means it's chosen by the people. Think of what we have in the United States. We have elections every November where we vote for representatives and senators and presidents and town councilors. It's where basically we have a say in who runs our government. The next major limb of government is a totalitarian government, and that's a government where the party chooses who's in charge. The biggest example of that right now, I guess, would be China. The Communist Party of China every 10 years chooses a new president. The people don't necessarily vote for it. And if you look at maybe Iran right now, Iran just had a presidential election. You might say, wow, their president was chosen by the people. Well, while that may be true, they could only vote for the so many people that the political party in Iran chose in the first place. So it's like you don't get a choice between apples and oranges, you get a choice between Macintosh and Golden Delicious. The last way government can really be chosen, as far as my thoughts go, is by a few people, and in that we call that an oligarchy or a plutocracy. That's when all the power rests in the hands of, say, a handful of people. Oftentimes, these are the people in the military. You could look at Egypt right now and argue that they are an oligarchy because and this is, of course, September 2013, so if you're watching this in the future and Egypt's become a great democracy, we're all happy for it. But as of right now, the military has chosen who's in charge. And that is a select few people, those select few generals, who get to make that call. Now, with all that being said, all of those can also be revolutionary governments. And that quite simply is a government that's chosen by people who just had a revolution. So the American government, way back in the late 1700s, even though it was democratic, was also revolutionary, because we overthrew the British and we got rid of the old form of government. Now, for your notes, it's a great idea right now. When I'm done, pause the video, draw an image and a few words about what we just went over. All right, off those limbs that we just talked about, there are a number of different styles of government. The first one we're going to go over should be very familiar to you. That's a republic. That's what we have right here in the United States. In a republic, you elect representatives that vote for you. We can't have a direct democracy because if you think of all the different things Congress, or right now all the things Congress does not do, but Congress should be doing, all those things, we wouldn't really have the time. We'd have so many elections, it'd be very costly. So we elect people to do that work for us. They're chosen for a set amount of time and they represent an area. Here in Maine, Mike Mishu and Shelley Pingree are our current two congresspeople, and they're elected every 2 years to represent Districts 1 and 2 in Maine. We also have elected Angus King and Susan Collin as our senators. For every 6 years, they represent the entire state. Republics are also usually led by an elected president. Currently, that's Barack Obama. Now, similar is a parliamentary style of government. In a parliamentary system, again, we elect representatives and they vote for the people. However, in this case, reps are still chosen for a set amount of time, and they represent the people of an area or a political party. So that's the difference. You may not necessarily be voting for a person but voting for the party. And depending on how the percentages work out, so if, say, the red party, the blue party, and the green party, if the red party gets 40% of the votes, they get 40% of the representatives. The blue party gets 40% of the votes, they get 40% of the representatives. The green party is left with 20%, and they get 20% of the representatives. When all this is said and done, though, those representatives choose the leaders of the government, who's usually called a prime minister. They have this in Canada, and they also have it over in Great Britain. Oftentimes, especially in countries that used to be part of the British Empire, there is also a monarch, a king or queen, who is technically in charge. Now, today they're a figurehead, but because that's just the tradition they have, technically the Queen of England is still the one who is the highest power in those countries. So for your notes, I want you to take a second to work with someone who's sitting by you and doing the same activity. If you're doing this alone, obviously, you've got to either have split personality or you've just got to play along. I want you to compare how republics and parliamentary systems are the same and different. All right, the next government style we're going to go over is a dictatorship. I'm not talking about Sacha Baron Cohen here. I'm talking about when a country or an area is ruled by one leader. Usually this person has taken power or kept it through force, because people don't really like it when one person's calling all of the shots. Oftentimes the army is also in control, because if you're going to take power, you need to do so by force. Great example right now is Syria, Bashar al-Assad, brutal dictator, keeping power by force. Although since his father used to be in charge, I guess you could also claim it was a monarchy. Nonetheless, dictatorships almost always aren't good. So quickly jot down, get your brain working. What do you think it would be like to live in a dictatorship? And if you're doing this activity in class, be prepared to share. Now we get to the monarchy, which I mentioned earlier. In a monarchy, your ruler is usually a king or a queen, and they get power because whoever was in power before them is a relative. Usually it's the father who passes power down to their oldest son. Although oftentimes it can be passed down through a brother who no longer wants to be in power. If you've seen the King's Speech, that's exactly what happens in that film. And sometimes they are in charge of everything that's going on. Great Britain circa 1776, this was certainly the case. Today, they're really just a figurehead. In a place like Saudi Arabia, the king and all the Saudi princes, they are definitely the ones calling all the shots. We definitely still have monarchies today in both forms. All right, so kind of a fun activity in your notes. How would you feel if you knew you were going to be a king or a queen? Kind of an interesting thought question. Take a second, jot it down, and then we'll share with your table group. Of course, you're working alone. That'd be silly. All right, we're getting towards the end here. Government style, theocracy. This is when the ruler claims to represent a set of religious beliefs, and the whole government is based off of those religious beliefs. Oftentimes, the ruler can also claim to be a god or a prophet. Now, we don't see many of these today, although when you think of the governments of ancient Egypt, where the rulers were literally seen as incarnations of gods, it was a lot more popular. Today, the best example is Vatican City, that small country located within the city of Rome, of course, led by the Catholic Church and the Pope, currently Pope Francis. All right, in your notes right now, explain theocracy. Why might some people like it, and why might some people not like it? Kind of make the argument for both sides. Last one we're going to go over, government style. It's called anarchy. And this is actually kind of a misnomer because this isn't a government style. It's when there's no government at all. In an anarchy, anything goes. So if you think of government, we think of who's in charge. But at the end of the day, the government is running our schools. The government's running our police force by and large. They're running our economy, and oftentimes they're the one who gives us a system of money. So all those things are gone, by and large, in an anarchy. This happens a lot in an area that's been war-torn. So there's, really, even if they have an elected government, they might not have any power. Somalia today is the best example. Once you get out of the capital of Mogadishu, and even in places in the capital, effectively there's no government. You are on your own. It is lawless. Kind of a scary place to be. And with that being said, in your notes, describe what you think it would be like to live in anarchy. To wrap up everything we've learned, there are three main families of government. We had democracy, we had oligarchy, and we had, what was the third one? Go look in your notes and review yourself. Haha, there you go. Check on your notes, fill it in. We also learned government styles overlap, especially that monarchy and parliamentary style. Those will overlap a lot. We also learned that every government is unique. You might not have picked up on that, but because each country has hundreds of years of history, what happens is they were a monarchy and now they're a democracy and they keep pieces of each. Or maybe they were a dictatorship and they're becoming a democracy. Everything's interconnected. And so these branches of government all get woven in a really strange way. It can make it difficult to understand, but if you understand the basics of what each government's like, you can kind of understand what's going on in each country. So I hope you enjoyed the video. Hope you're able to find that answer to the third main family of government in your notes. And thank you for watching.